And there you go. That's you, right?
After you?
After my song. Right. Perfecto. Laura. I'm Lori. Very pleased to meet you and how much Parkside and the whole project.
Dawn's promising skies, petals on a boat drifting. Imagine this in one pair of eyes, and this is my beloved. Strange spice from the south, honey through the comb, sifting. Imagine this on one eager mouth, and this is my beloved. And when he speaks, and when he talks to me, music, mystery. And when he moves, and when he walks with me, paradise comes suddenly near. All that can stand, all that can stand, all that's for the heart lifting. Imagine this in one perfect one, and this is my beloved, and this is my beloved.
We'll be starting in just a couple of moments. We have another slideshow to change to for the service. I'll take this opportunity to remind you, if you have a cell phone or another device that might make noise during the service, please turn off the ring, the vibrate, or whatever, so that we can be fully present for our observance today. An interment will follow the service today. I'm told that Mound and Graceland cemeteries are actually not the same cemetery. There's two cemeteries about a street apart. I've asked for clarification. Hopefully I'll have an announcement by the end of the service about where the interment will actually take place for those hardy enough to brave the elements. Alternatively, after our service is completed here, we will be holding a reception in the art gallery in the same building. You just go across the lobby to the far side and then make a right down that hall. There'll be a reception with something to drink, something to nibble, and most importantly, people to talk to and to connect with. One of the challenges we find when someone is lost is that we feel a little more empty and a little more lonely, and perhaps the presence of other people can help to compensate, not directly, but in some measure, for that loss. I also want to thank our performers today, both those who played before our service and those who will be playing after. We heard Gabriel Cruz on cello, playing Cello Suite No. 2 in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. We heard Jackie Geis and Fumi Nakayama playing And This Is My Beloved by Robert Wright and George Forrest, and Matthew Thompson on saxophone providing an improvised solo. Our concluding music, which you will hear at the end of the service, it will be by Migli Valentina Vicute on flute and Ben Kinchin on piano, Prie Ezerelio by Balis Divarionas. And so, I'm grateful for those who are here. I'm grateful for those who are online. I'm grateful for those who may watch this in days to come as a chance to remember. I'm grateful to the University of Wisconsin-Parkside for hosting us for this celebration of life. I'm also very grateful to Mark Chinitz and Lori Lippitz, who have been generous in their time and their emotions in caring for Dave in his last years, and also in caring for him after his death. My name is Rabbi Adam Shalom. I'm the rabbi of Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation in the North Chicago suburbs. I had the chance to meet Dave over the last 6 years or so, and it was a special experience for me to get to know him even at the end of his life. A life well lived is like a work of art. It is sculpted and shaped by time and weather, by choice and by circumstance, by artist and by audience. And that means that there is no one way to tell the story, to remember the life. Each of us will have our own memories, our own emotions, our own attachment to the person we have lost. And there will always be more stories, more details that could yet be told but may not be included today. David Beach was a professor and a husband and a child and a sibling and an uncle and a cousin and a gardener and a music lover and a progressive and a philanthropist who put his money where his values were. David was also a Yiddish word that has made its way into English. He was a mensch. A mensch is a person, literally, but it's the best kind of person. Someone who is kind and generous and caring. Some of us believe that this life is the prelude to another, while some of us believe that this life is all there is, and thus all the more precious. Whatever we believe, we share the power of loving memory, and we know that for the rest of our lives, Dave will live on in the culture that he loved and the gifts that he gave. We'll begin our memorial service today with the poem My Hereafter by Juanita DeLong. If you care to follow along, it is printed in the service booklet. My Hereafter. Do not come when I am dead, to sit beside a low green mound, or bring the first gay daffodils because I love you so, for I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees, and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the limpid river. I will warm your work-glorified hands through the glow of winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness to the drop, drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters. I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with the flaming radiance of the sunrise and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy. They are part of me. I shall become part of them. Yep. There's Dave. David Beach was born in September of 1941, when the entire world was at war. He was born in Manhattan, New York, to Elias and Lena, only 9 months after his parents got married. Consider that. He was named after his paternal grandfather. He grew up 100 miles north of New York City in Rhinebeck, New York, which is where his paternal grandparents lived and where they're buried. His mother, Lena Bernstein, was Jewish by background and had immigrated with her parents and her sister, in David's words, to escape religion and political oppression, to live the freedom of self-determination. You'll hear that theme through his life. David's parents raised him Christian, not telling him of his Jewish heritage for many years. He was actually christened in the Methodist Church in 1944, the same year his sister Mary was born. As a young adult, David reconnected with his Jewish roots, formally converting to Judaism at age 20 and trying synagogue life off and on through adulthood, though in the end nothing was ever a perfect fit. Even my own congregation, that was just as philosophically secular as Dave was, even our humanistic Jewish services were a bit too much ritual for Dave's temperament. David described the story he was told of his mother's father, Louis, as formative for him. First, Louis rebelled against the family's desire for him to go into business in favor of rabbinical study. And then he rebelled against Judaism and organized religion entirely and became a teacher instead. As Dave put it in a memory book, the combination of commitment to the idea of religion plus the disappointment in distancing oneself from it, predates his own values and disappointment, but also the commitment to teaching. Growing up, David had a problematic relationship with his own father. In his words, his parents taught him how not to relate to others. However, Dave's father was an extensive gardener, as Dave would become himself, and he remembered summer lunches of simply taking a salt shaker into the garden for tomatoes or cucumbers or beans and the like. And after his retirement, Dave would travel back to upstate New York regularly to visit family and friends and to reconnect with his past. I hope some of them are online either now or in the future as well. David graduated as valedictorian of Rhinebeck Central High School in 1959, and thanks to a scholarship, and despite some financial challenges, he was able to graduate from Wesleyan University with a BA in psychology in 1963. He went on to earn a PhD in psychology at the University of Rochester in 1967. He did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Institute of Child Development at the University of Minnesota, and then he became an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo, also known as the State University of New York at Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo, staying there until 1972. And then he made a decision in 1972 that determined the rest of his life. He answered an advertisement for a position at a new campus in the University of Wisconsin system to be called Parkside, which had just held its first classes in 1969. David would stay at Parkside as a professor of psychology for the next 35 years until his retirement in 2007. This part of the world, This learning community, this universe of people and personalities, this would be his home for his career and beyond. Now, those are just dates and places, but Dave was much more than facts. I want to highlight today three aspects of his personality, three themes of his life symphony, if you will, that were familiar to those who knew him. These are lessons that his example can teach even now that he is gone. One last gift of wisdom and kindness. First, live a life of the mind. Learn and teach. Dave had a lifetime love of learning and teaching. When I first met him a few years ago, he had an insatiable desire to learn. Attending services was not his thing, but he was willing to take the drive down from his home up here in Wisconsin to our congregation space in Illinois regularly for adult learning classes. He also expressed a desire to read on his own, and we met up periodically to discuss what he had read and learned, the questions he had, because he wanted to not just learn, but learn some more. Books and music were his constant companions. He said one of his all-time favorites was Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. But when he was reading or he was listening, he could become oblivious to the outside world and enter into a time outside of time. And any time you saw him in the last several years, he would show up early if possible, and always with a book of either crossword puzzles or Sudoku or one of each. Now, Dave didn't publish much in the academic world. He focused instead on teaching and on serving the campus. He described himself as a lifespan developmentalist, using some of the findings and methodology of psychology, but embedding them in a constructive and holistic worldview. In 1976, he was awarded tenure. He was elected to the University Committee and Personnel Committee, and he was awarded Teacher of the Year. He then moved up to administrative positions. He became the inaugural head of the new Behavioral Science Division, which combined psychology, sociology, and anthropology, but that also meant reducing his teaching and making hard personnel decisions. In his recollections, and these were his words, "I ain't no administrator. As soon as I could, I retreated into the classroom." He also served later as the founding director of the Advising Center, trying to organize faculty advising, which was a challenge. But his true love was working with students, was teaching, imparting wisdom, empowering them to become scholars in their own right, living that life of the mind. We received a message from his longtime colleague, Michael Gertman, that I'd like to share. "It is with genuine sadness that I learned of the passing of my former colleague and friend, David Beach. Dave was already an associate professor in the psychology department when I joined the department in 1982, and we were colleagues until he retired. I was fortunate to have Dave as a valued colleague for 25 years, and for most of that time only a few doors away in Molinaro Hall. Dave loved teaching, was deeply interested in the learning process and in helping students to become better learners. Before critical thinking became a popular phrase in academia, Dave was there challenging his students to practice it. His area of expertise was human development. He regularly taught our introductory course as well as an advanced course in the area. It was a perfect fit for him. He could emphasize the theoretical and scientific bases of the field, and at the same time he delighted in showing students applications to their real-world lives, such as in child rearing and in their own adult development. I think he really enjoyed helping students to expand their knowledge and their self-understanding. Another area in which Dave took special care to help students was in academic advising. For Dave, advising was much more than just course selection and program completion. He spent time getting to know students, not just their academic plans and aspirations, but also their personal lives and situations. His advising sessions were never rushed, and I think that his students felt that he genuinely cared about them. Even after Dave retired, he generously continued to help the department with academic advising. It was one of his passions. As I reflect on my time with Dave, I particularly value some of the smaller moments now. The stimulating conversations of the hallways, his sense of humor, and his ready laugh. He always treated me with kindness, concern, and respect. I'm sorry that I lost touch with him after he retired, although I followed the campus news items describing his generous contributions to the university music programs. Occasionally, I would run into him at a lunch table in Main Place. Almost always, his first question would be, "So, how's the family?" It seemed so minor, but appropriate. I'll miss you, Dave, and may your memory be for a blessing. Lesson number 1, live a life of the mind, learn and teach. The second theme of Dave's symphony, do good. In a book of memories, Dave wrote, "My life goal has been to leave every social and physical setting I've inhabited a bit better for my involvement. Clearly, I've not always succeeded, but I hope I'm remembered as having tried." Dave was a lifelong lover of peace, as we'll also hear later. Talking with one of my own congregation members recently, who happened to have been an undergraduate at the University of Buffalo when Dave was an assistant professor there, Dave shared memories of his experience on campus during the Vietnam War and Cambodian invasion protests in 1970, standing between the protesters and the National Guard to try to prevent a tragedy such as occurred at Kent State. As we'll see, one of his most cherished initiatives was supporting efforts for music to build bridges for peace. In 1992, Dave decided to reject his earlier rejection of organized religion and explored the Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church in Racine. As he recalled it, "The very first line I read in the literature I was sent said, 'We, the members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person.' I was hooked. Never before or since has a line of prose spoken so centrally and forcefully to my core, the inherent worth and dignity of every person." Dave especially treasured the UU tradition of social action and working for social justice and progressive values. His involvement at Olympia Brown included serving 2 years as congregation president, among other years on the board, and that community connection led to involvement with Racine's Interfaith Coalition, where he also served as president. He was also on the board and vice president of the Racine Symphony Orchestra, and also president of the Racine Literacy Council. Even earlier, he'd been on the board and president for 2 years of the Mental Health of Racine County organization. This was a person who wanted to do good and to put his time and his energy and his effort and his expertise where his values were. It was also through these efforts to do good that he met Carmen, who became his partner in love and in life for 30 years. So sometimes doing good is good for you. In that book of memories, Dave wrote, "I've greatly enjoyed giving forward, thereby trying to spare others at least some of the financial stress I endured through my college years. I hope thereby to encourage my recipients to become forward givers themselves." On Dave's retirement, Dave and Carmen endowed a generous music scholarship at the university, whose music he had enjoyed so much over the years, and he continued to sponsor performances, attend rehearsals, and support the causes he valued until the end of his days and beyond. Second lesson, do good. And the third, keep busy and find joy. In his personal life, Dave wanted to do better than his father. He had hoped to be a successful husband and a father with a stable income while doing something he found rewarding. And though his first marriage did not succeed and fatherhood hopes faded, he dedicated himself ever more deeply to teaching and his own personal pursuits, his love of music, his colleagues and friends, softball and gardening and DIYing, making his home into his homestead. If you ever visited his house, you could see and especially taste the fruits of his labors. Even in retirement, he stayed actively engaged in attending concerts in Racine and Milwaukee and supporting the artists and programs he valued, like Music and More at the First Presbyterian Church and many others. Over the last 6 years, Dave and I would often meet for lunch or an early dinner. Panera was one of his staples, but he was always up for a brunch place where he could order an order of lox, smoked salmon, for those who don't know. He also enjoyed Middle Eastern and Indian food with me. He loved many things about Southeast Wisconsin, but its range of global food options was not one of them. no offense intended. His love of Ashkenazi Jewish food, like pickles, olives, bagels, and cream cheese, and especially salty lox, came from his youth and weekend trips to the city, as New York City residents and their neighbors call it. Despite the physical challenges of Dave's last several years, a lack of kidney function declining to the point of dialysis required, mobility challenges with knee and hip pain, painful relationship challenges, and the eventual need to leave his beloved home and his full garden, Dave always faced these challenges with courage. I was always personally impressed simply by his upper body strength, despite everything, his willingness to haul around a wheelchair into his car and out of his car so he could remain in charge of his life as long as he could. He could be stubborn, but that also meant he was in charge of his life, as best he could be until the end, and even through the end when he chose hospice care. Now, Dave was not a saint. None of us are. He had a temper, and at times that could push people away. He could be impatient, and while he was great talking one-on-one or teaching a full class, sometimes a small group or a dinner party might find him separate more than schmoozing. And yet, even in these last months, when he moved to Sedgebrook, he was active there. He was very much looking forward to their woodworking shop and their gardening experience as a continuation of his home workshop and garden that he had used to shape his home. He was involved in a writer's group. He was learning how to play bridge and more. And of course, he brought music to that community too, as we'll see and hear in a few moments. So the third lesson, keep busy and find joy. When a work of art is completed, when the symphony ends, there is a moment where we catch our breath, we appreciate what we have experienced, and then the applause, the reflection, the appreciation, the pursuit of more beauty in the days to come. David Beach's life has reached the final measure. All that is left is one long rest. We who have appreciated his performance, we are the lucky ones who knew him, who benefited from his efforts and his emotions, his desires and his deeds. He lives on in the rhymes of the masters, the lilt of the violin, the bursting cadence of the organ, the tender rose gold of the after sunsets, and the gifts that he gave to the future of music and community and peace. He is now a part of all of them. In a few moments, we will hear more about David's life and his words and deeds and how they've impacted the world in the past and for the future. But at this point, this remembrance of David Beach has been too much talking. We need more music. And with that, I would like to invite Lori Lippitz, founder and artistic director of the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band, to share a few words and especially some music.
In 2015, a former faculty member of University of Wisconsin-Parkside contacted me about the possibility of bringing Maxwell Street Klezmer Band to Racine. 10 years later, almost to the day, I saw him for the last time. Grinning from ear to ear after the great success of a Hanukkah concert that he had meticulously crafted with me at Sedgebrook, where he was living. He wanted the Peter, Paul, and Mary song, Light One Candle, to end the show, and for everyone in the audience to hold a candle. And this was a vision he had, because he was a real producer, you know? So despite all of his physical challenges, which were many in December, he was ecstatic because it meant so much to him to produce a musical work of art, and especially one that promoted the message of peace. So you have heard students playing, and you will hear them again. Many people have been touched by Dave's scholarship, but he was, as the rabbi said, a passionate teacher who enjoyed nothing more than helping to open the minds of young people through education. So we've put a song up for you to sing with me, at least the English part if you'd like, or we've put up the, we've put out the Yiddish words as well in transliteration. It's a traditional Yiddish song that describes how the rabbi imparts our entire past and our entire wisdom to students by first teaching them those very first letters, Aleph, Beis, A of the alphabet. Auf in Pripyatschik brennt a fire, und in Stub is heiß, und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, dem Aleph Beis, und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach, dem Aleph Beis. Setze Kinderlach, gedenkje Teiere, was lernen da. Solche noch einmal und Tacke noch einmal, kommet Aleph ho. Solche noch einmal und Tacke noch einmal, kommet Aleph ho. And sing with me. In the stove of stone a little fire burns, and the room is warm. There the rabbi writes the Hebrew alphabet for the little ones. There the rabbi writes the Hebrew alphabet for the little ones. Learn, my little ones, and look carefully at the words I draw. Say it once again, and children, once again. Aleph sounds like ah. Say it once again, and children, once again. Aleph sounds like ah.
At this time, I'd like to invite two professors in the University of Wisconsin-Parkside Music Program, Drs. James Kinchin and Laura Rexroth, to come forward and share some memories and thoughts about the legacy of David Beach.
In the spring of 2014, I was hired to be the next director of bands at the University of Parkside. The two-day final audition, because as a musician I always think of job interviews as auditions, was typically jam-packed. However, it did not include working with or hearing the Parkside Community Band, and I wanted to know about that part of my job before I started in the fall. I'm a huge supporter of community music and was delighted that I would have the opportunity to work with this ensemble. I saw there was one last concert left in the season and traveled from Massachusetts to hear them. I told then Chair Alvaro Garcia I would just sneak in and sneak out, no fuss. The department didn't need to do anything. I sat down in the balcony, right up there. The fellow next to me said hello, and we immediately fell into an easy conversation about the band and the pieces they were performing that night. Shortly after, the lights went down and we had to stop chatting. I was enjoying the concert, including a presentation to my predecessor, Mark Eichner, recognizing the wonderful work he had done at Parkside, when I heard Alvaro say something like, "We are happy to honor Mark tonight, and we are fortunate to be able to introduce the next director of bands who is here tonight." And by then I'm thinking, no. But it was too late. He said my name, and gestured towards the audience, and so I stood up. After the applause, and as I was sitting back down, Dave Beach, who, of course, I had sat down next to, said in his finest dry Dave Beach voice, "Oh, that's who you are," and smiled. We quickly discovered we had many things in common, including a love of gardening. We shared an interest in the joys of growing our own food and trying out different planting combinations and sharing the names of new strains of tomatoes or green beans that we'd tried and their success rates every summer. By the way, Dave's garden was enormous and so bountiful he had more than one freezer at his house to store food for the off-season, after even giving sackfuls away. We also shared stories of growing up. His parents and my grandparents lived in the same era, and we discussed a lot of the old ways of doing things, canning and preserving food, life on the farm, and life in general before the multitude of digital busyness. David Beach was a lifelong learner. He was constantly curious about anything, especially how it connected to being human, humanness. He liked nothing better than to come to my evening rehearsals of the community band and listen, and I mean really listen. Then he'd corner me afterwards to talk about what he'd heard, diagnose and analyze new sounds or styles that he hadn't heard before, or a fresh sound he thought was very interesting. He was never shy about telling me what he really liked and what he really didn't like. But he always asked some of the most thoughtful questions about music I've ever encountered. Aside from the Thursday night dissection of all things musical, every couple of weeks we would meet for coffee or lunch. I always knew to expect a lively, interesting, and meaningful conversation with Dave. David was supportive of everyone that he knew, but he was particularly supportive of our department and of our students with amazing generosity. He created incredible scholarships to aid in their success and sponsored many of our Friday noon concerts to give them access to other musics that would expand their listening and their understanding. He was interested in our students as people, as humans, and supported them not only with his financial gifts, but with his attendance at their concerts, recitals, and other special events. I will miss our coffee and lunches. I will miss our musical discussions. I will miss Dave's outlook on what it means to be human. Most of all, I will miss David Beach.
Good afternoon. I stand before you to say a few words about Phil on behalf of my music department colleagues. Now, before you think that I've lost it, give me a moment to explain. And I think that that what I have to say will make sense to you. The Phil of which I speak, P-H-I-L, is a prefix that we use in our language that comes to us originally from the Greek and by way of Latin. And it is, for today's observance, the rubric that I have chosen for this tribute to my colleague and our friend, David Beach. By the way, David helped welcome me to this campus when I arrived a little bit before Laura in 1989, at which time he was about to complete almost 2 decades on the faculty. So, Phil. The first Phil that I want to talk about is Philharmonic. Literally, a love of musical harmony. Dave Beach loved music. You've heard that before, and I reiterate that. In a real sense, we are here in this citadel of music performance to celebrate his life because music was something that he loved listening to, that he valued and appreciated. In his retirement years, and you've heard versions of this before, Dave came often to hear performances by students, faculty, and the guests that we brought in. He and Carmen often came to concerts. In later years, as his health declined and his mobility decreased, he would come on a walker and finally in a wheelchair to enjoy musical performances. And when distance and circumstance made that less practical, he found ways of inviting student musicians to his community down in Illinois to perform for him and fellow residents. Dave loved music. And I think you'd be interested to know this. After we had learned that he was in hospice, I made an overture to our dean and said, wow, it would be great if it was possible for us to get a group of performers to go down, even for a short performance. And you would be just really amazed to know that literally at the same time and separately, totally separately, a student approached me with that same idea. And then we learned that Dave had passed from our presence. But it was out of this love of music that we wanted to share still with him the sounds that he loved to hear so much. Then Dave Beach was a philanthrope, another Phil. He loved what we did here in such a way as to generously give of his own resources in support of our music making, and especially the students who made that music. Dave supported our concerts. His beneficence helped make it possible to bring in talented guest performers, especially to our Friday noon concert series. His financial support helped enable our choral and instrumental ensembles to do some of the big notable performances that we were able to mount. And he directly supported our talented students through his generous support for music scholarships. Some of these students, some now graduated, held scholarships named for Dave Beach. And the final Phil is philosophy. Not in the sense of a complete system of thought such as one might find in a rigorous study of Socrates or Plato or Aristotle, but in a more general daily usage of the term as a more or less coherent, consistent way of thinking and valuing that affects and informs our outlook, actions, and decisions. Philosophy literally translates to a love of wisdom. Dave wisely exemplified that love. He loved beauty. He loved humanity. He loved those things that help uplift people and improve the human condition. And, to say it again, he loved beauty, certainly as a partaker of the beautiful, but even more importantly, as one who devoted himself to helping make the world a more beautiful place for us all. Today, we remember Dave, and as we continue in our artistic pursuits, we'll continue to remember him fondly in times to come. Thank you, Dave, for your fills, your gifts of love that have brightened our music making and lifted our lives.
Thank you, professors. At this time, I would love to invite forward Alma Rincon, who became connected to Dave as she started work as a caregiver for Carmen, and eventually became a close friend of Dave, providing some care as well. Alma, thank you for being here, and welcome.
Hi, I'm Alma Rincon, and I'm not public speaker. Yes, I initially started caring for Carmen and before COVID, and just that happened that she just had to move to New York for different reasons. And I said, okay, Dave, I'm at your side now. He said, okay, Alma, see you. The follow next week when she moved, she called me and she said, Alma, go check on Dave. I'm not sure what is going on with him. So I go and see, and he was sitting. What are you doing here, Alma? I told you don't come in again. And I said, well, I'm coming and checking on you. And he said, well, you're right, I need you. So we start talking and eventually transitioning to full care for him. So like all of you know, 3 things he was very extremely defined by: education, gardening, and love for music. Somehow he has any chance to talk to me about my kids, because now in the beginning I was just myself, and then later on all my family was involved in the package with him. So we start little by little, you know. He started coming to meet my kids in my house, have dinners in my house, and became a tradition every Sunday. So to sit and eat dinners. Of course, as you know him, he was a strong will. And we ended up arguing. Alma has a strong will too. We start arguing, and my kids said, Mom, don't argue with Dave. You know, he just want to help us. Because he always tried to encourage my kids, and he was a recruiter for Parkside. So, come on, you know, Parkside has a good programs. Music is the best, and come on. And he ended up, you know, trying to all my kids being musicians. Eventually, my kids play music, and my youngest son, my oldest daughter played cello, my next son played piano, and my 3rd kid played drums. Which one he connected with Mark Police for drum lessons. I have a good teacher for him. Come on, let's go. Talk to him, talk to him. So anyway, we've been connected with him. And just his passion for music. He always think that education for him was a must for every child. Every child needs to have an education. Every child is smart. Nobody is dumb or stupid. Everybody's smart, Alma. So he makes sure to make my kids understand that the education, it was important. And yes, I always ask him, Dave, why you became a psychologist? I'm curious. And we have a long conversation. And of course, he said, I want to understand how my father behaved. And we ended up crying together. So because he said always he wants to know the behavior of the mind of the human. So, and I said, you got it, Dave, at the end? So he was quiet, but gardening, we always spend time gardening, long hours. And he put his music. He said, Alma, you hear this? There's a new one. And I said, Dave, yes, I heard that, because I'm not sure the same. So, but very often when I come to his house, he was working a new gadget for the garden, you know, watering, something easy, something more convenient, not just spend too much time. It was Dave. You know, Dave always thinking and how to grow new vegetables. And, Alma, what do you want? I said, bell peppers. No, I don't want the bell peppers. I want jalapenos. So I don't like it, but I do. So, okay, I have my little garden, you know, too, in his house. So with jalapenos, with Mexican things, that's what he said. My Mexican things. So moving to Illinois for him, it was a big, big thing. So here for education, back then it was COVID. My youngest son was falling behind in math and reading. So he took the time and sit with him and read until he got it. Said, Dave, I got it. Give me a break. But he eventually got it, math and reading. So he took the time. So after that, he said, okay, I'm not coming to see you anymore, Alma. I come to see the dog, because we have a dog. So he come and spend hours in our house, you know, and my kids like the Super Bowl and play ball, and so they talk, so they have a relationship with the kids too. So yes, in the end, when he had to make the decision to move to Illinois, he said his main concern was not be able to attend to the many concerts in Parkside. It was one of the biggest ones. He said, Alma, I still have dreams to achieve. He was referring to the trip he had planned, and I'm coming. He wanted to visit his hometown in New York, which has been talking about for the longest time. And even he said, Alma, let's go, let's go. I said, okay, let's go. So, but due to his failing health, his trip was borderline, basically impossible to go. So he moved to Illinois and managed to call me very often. And we get together and he liked coffee from Panera. I don't like Panera, but he said, okay, we take turns. Okay, we go to ONH one time and he go to Panera another time, or he come with his coffee. But we have a chance to share a lot in common. It's the hard part when you are a caregiver, you come in the end. But this time, kind of more. So he made the last call. I will say the last call. And he said, Alma, I would not make it in March because we have plans for March. So he liked to, as all you know, he tax pay, it was on the dot. He says, it's tax time and I need to pay all these bills and blah, blah. Okay. And he said, Alma, we have to cancel our visit in March. And I says, oh, okay. So you want me to come over? He said, I don't want you to see me the way I'm looking now. I'm weak, and I think so it's the last time you're going to hear from me today. I said, Dave, stop. And that's how we said, stop. And he said, Alma, give the best of me to Luis, Olivia, Caleb, and he mentioned all my kids. He says, weak, I cannot make it. But make sure your kids have the best education. And I don't know what Olivia going to achieve. He was my oldest daughter. But give my best to her. Give a hug, and you receive a kiss. And I said, oh, I gave the best one. I always teasing around. It was the last time I talked to him. But yes, I have a good memories. And when I get to meet Mikla, because always he was talking about Mikla too. How he was concerned about the education all the kids have for same. So thank you very much, and for all of you are here. So I know he will be, happy to see all of us here celebrating with music, with memories, and he did the best for all of us, I'm for sure, because he was a very big advocate for education for my kids too. So thank you.
Thank you, Alma. On our screen, you can see a picture of the main gathering hall at Sedgebrook, the retirement community that David joined. This is a short clip of a recording from that concert that Lori was mentioning. When the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band came to perform, you can see how crowded the gathering is, and Dave's vision was 1,000 points of light, to borrow a phrase. And so what we'll hear is just a small clip of that. You might recognize the music if you know the song Light One Candle. But the more important point is to see the joy, the community, the connection between people created by music and by Dave, the production manager. this time I'd like to invite forward Mark Chinitz. There's a picture of them together at a baseball game. Mark, would you please come share?
I've known Dr. Dave Beach since 2015, when he first came into my life as a fan of my wife's organization, the Klezmer Music Foundation, which includes the performing groups, the Maxwell Street Klezmer Band, the Junior Klezmer Orchestra, and importantly, the Salam Shalom Music Project, a group of musicians from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faiths that were interested in learning music from each other's cultural backgrounds. His intellectual curiosity and fundamental belief that peace is an active endeavor inspired Dave to bring the interfaith group to Parkside for a concert in 2016. But Dave was not a passive sponsor. He took the role of producer and helped to craft these performances. He and Carmen came down a dozen times from Racine to our house in Skokie to attend rehearsals. It was then that Dave and I started talking about the topics from politics to travel to sports. He held strong convictions, but never pontificated on his opinions, to me at least. I learned that he was both a Green Bay Packers and Milwaukee Brewers fan, but in the past, he had also rooted for the Cubs, the Bears, and the Minnesota Vikings. When it came to sports, what comes to mind is Stephen Still's song, "Love the One You're With." Dave started driving to Chicago to join me at Wrigley Field, and I would go up to Racine to take him to American Family Field in Milwaukee. In those visits to his home, I discovered that Dave was an accomplished gardener and woodworker who had built raised beds in his backyard and planted a small farm's worth of vegetables: Swiss chard, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, beets, onions, and peas, to name a few. Dave had a wonderful green thumb, which you've heard a few times. With Lori, I fondly remember meals made from that garden. Also, attached to his garage, he built out a complex storage shed to house the myriad tools needed for his craft. I was taken with Dave's ingenious method for watering his small acreage, suspending several oscillating sprinklers over raised beds. Also, he built a complex radio antenna on his roof so that he could get a clear signal from WFMT, the Chicago Classical Music Station. While hanging out with Dave, I learned of his passion for music. His musical tastes included Broadway musicals, folk music. He attended many Irish fests to enjoy Celtic music, and of course, classical music. His greatest joy was hearing music coming from the instruments and watching the musicians creating the music in front of his eyes. In recent months, as health challenges grew, I would pick up some deli food every few weeks and go watch football games with him in his apartment at Sedgebrook, sometimes being joined by my brother-in-law, Mike. I will remember Dave as the dearest of friends, as a passionate educator, an advocate and supporter of many great things.
I just wanted to share a picture of Dave at one of those rehearsals for Salam Shalom. You can see his joy at being there, not playing anything, but experiencing everything in that moment. And then here's another picture of that performance. You can actually find a recording of the concert that was held here at Parkside. If you go to the memorial page on the Chicago Jewish Funerals website, they have a link there to a video recording that was done here, if you have a chance to experience it.
I just wanted to mention that this postcard, where I found this postcard, was he had selected, when he moved to Sedgebrook, a small, very small bunch of photographs, most of which you saw at the beginning on a repeating reel. And this was in the photographs of his family and his youth. That was how important it was to him that he put it in with those special photographs.
Indeed it was. In your service booklet, there is a text entitled El Maleh Rachamim, which is a traditional prayer recited upon a death. It is hoping for eternal rest. It is part of that reflection of Jewish tradition. Now, Dave was not a supernaturalist, did not believe in an afterlife or a God that intervenes or judges in the world. And yet he believed in music. He believed in beauty and in melody. And he believed in friendship and in kindness. And so for those for whom this prayer is evocative and for whom the melody connects to something deep in their souls, I've given Lori the opportunity to sing El Maleh Rachamim, hoping for peace, for quiet, and for some kind of eternity.
El Maleh Rachamim, Shochen B'Amramim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina. Im Kedoshim Utachorim, Kezohara Kiamazirim, Et Nishmat David Beach, Shehalacha Li'olamo, Ana Ba'al HaRachamim, Yastirehu, Besetek Nafef, Li'olamim. Yitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach, v'yanuach, b'shalom al mishkavo. V'namar Amen.
On the back cover of the memorial booklet, hopefully you received on your entrance to this space, you will find a text that is a humanistic Kaddish. The Kaddish is part of the daily Jewish prayer service. It is traditionally a praise of God. This adapted version has been modified to maintain the cadence of the traditional prayer, but instead of praising a divinity, it praises peace. Peace in the world, the peace that David has found after those days of suffering, the peace that we seek in a world without David. After all, in Jewish life, when we remember someone, we wish shalom alav, peace upon him, but we also mean peace upon us. If you are comfortable standing, could I ask you to stand for just a moment? I will read this adapted text in Aramaic, and then we will say the English all together if you are moved to do so. Yitgadal vayitgadash Shlomo ba'alma. Nivra Shlomo chirutana, v'namlich malchute b'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chay dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba mevorach leolam ulealmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, Shlomo ba'alma brichu. Le'ele min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nehmata da'amiran ba'alma v'imru shalom. Yehei Shlomo Rabba v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom ba'olam aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru shalom. In English, wonderful is peace in the world. Let us create a peaceful world and let us establish its kingdom now and in the future. May peace come upon us to bless our lives. May we always continue to honor peace in the world, even though no praise can equal the importance of its reality. May peace and life prevail for us and for all Israel. Let us work to create peace here on earth for all people, and let us say, peace. Please be seated. As a closing song for our celebration of Dave's life today, we would like to include one of the staple songs of the Fellowship of Salom Shalom. It is a song entitled simply Salam. It's often known as Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu in Hebrew. Lori will explain, but I know that our students are going to be joining in playing as well. This is a way for bringing together generations and peoples. And after all, we should remember that in Hebrew, as well as in Arabic, the word shalom, salam, means peace. It also means hello, and it also means goodbye. And so an appropriate connection for the conclusion of our service here today. Please.
As the students are coming up and set up, I'll just introduce a few words. In 2001, I created an interfaith performing group whose purpose it was to humanize Muslims, Jews, and Christians in each other's eyes through music. And in 2016, one of the first and very ambitious projects that Dave and I collaborated on was bringing the Salam Shalom Music Project to Parkside for a full day of workshops, culminating in a night of singing, dancing, and playing music. He even made this T-shirt for the band to wear, which says in Arabic, Salam at the top, and in Hebrew, Shalom, and then peace after that. Featured on the home page of the Salam Shalom Music Project is this quote that Dave wrote. This professional ensemble of Arabic and Jewish musicians exemplifies and promotes peaceful collaboration. Perhaps more important than what the Salam Shalom Music Project does is the quality and spirit with which they do it. Amro Hosni Helmi, who was the oud player for that project, for our group, when I told him about Dave's passing a few days ago, he wrote the following that he wanted to share. The world has lost a truly remarkable soul. David was more than just a man. He was a bridge between hearts, a champion of unity, and a believer in the power of music to transcend faith and differences. His passion for interfaith harmony was not just an idea, but a melody that he lived, one that will continue to echo in the lives he touched. My heart is with you, Lori, in this profound loss. May his memory be a guiding light, and may the love he shared on and in music and the people he brought together. After the 1-2 punch of the pandemic, followed by the hostilities in the Middle East, our group has been unable to perform, and it made Dave quite sad. He wanted to bring them to Sedgebrook this year, but he finally was advised it would not yet be the right time. He and I commiserated privately that this group would be playing at exactly the right time, because the time of war and strife is when you need to humanize members of other faith communities. Dave hated the tendency of our human race to descend into war, and supporting this group was one of his ways of fighting back. It would have made him so happy today to see these young Parkside musicians whom he felt so close to come together with me to sing this song from the song that we would always end our concerts with. And the words are up there, and I hope that you will be able to sing with them as well. They are in Arabic, in Hebrew and in Arabic, and they speak of peace. Let me just check. me hear your, let me have your A. We tune because we care. Okay. The room is very cold and it has lost its velocity here. Okay, that will do. You just play loud. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, v'al kulam. Yiji salam aleina, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, v'al kulam salam. Aleinu v'al kol ha'olam, salam, salam, salam. Aleinu al kol ilalem, salam, salam, salam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, v'al kulam. Yiji salam aleina, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam, salam. Aleinu v'al kol ha'olam, salam, salam, salam. Aleinu al kol ilalem, salam, salam, salam. Salam aleinu kol ha'olam, salam, salam. Let me hear you. Salam aleinu kol ilalem, salam, salam, salam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, v'al kulam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam aleina, yiji salam, salam. Aleinu v'al ha'olam, salam, salam, salam. Aleinu al kol ilalem, salam, salam, salam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, v'al
Good. And so this marks the conclusion of our service here. We have some recess music you'll be hearing in a moment. And we do have a reception in the art gallery across the lobby for those who are staying. And for those who are going, the interment will be at Graceland Cemetery in Racine. Hopefully some of you will join us there, or if it's just a few, it's just a few. We know that Dave's life means more and has echoed more through the past and the future than one moment. And so I thank you for coming, And as a concluding gesture, I invite you to turn to the people next to you and wish them shalom, peace.